A lot of the information I've got has come from a series of surveys on the Swan Coastal Plain within the Perth metropolitan region. Really, you can look at how Banksia woodlands change predominantly by looking at this layer below the knees. Okay, we're now just going to go through and look at some of the common group plants in that low shrub layer. I find Bertia hypericoides is generally below my knee. The size of the plants change. Basically, it's the layer a metre and below. The two dominant families are the Proteaceae and the Myrtaceae. Pixie mops there, and the Swan River myrtle, two of the plants from below the knees. I've selected these plants because they're very common in Banksia woodland. This is in Perth itself. Either Fabaceae or the Papilionaceae. We've got two hovias here, Hovia pungens and Hovia trisperma, and we've also got Bossia ericarpa. Bossia ericarpa often forms a layer in bushland. It was one of the more common species in all the Banksia woodlands sampled. Another P, both of these are what we call priority species. This one here grows in the Banksia woodlands of places like Shenton bushland and Underwood Avenue bushland, on the Spearwood dunes on the Swan Coastal Plain, and this one grows in the damp Banksia woodlands, often with Banksia ilicifolia as the overstory. So both of those are relatively uncommon, and both of those are endemic to the Swan Coastal Plain. They only grow on the Swan Coastal Plain. This one only in the Perth region. This one from the Perth metropolitan area to Busselton. So they're very restricted plants on even a local scale, and Banksia woodland, of which they're part on a local and world scale. Now we're going into the herbs. This is the richest group below the knees, and the richest group, it's 40% of the species in the Banksia woodland. The Hemideraceae, and one of the most common plants in Banksia woodlands is the common cat's paw. Even though it'll be found in many bushland patches, it's actually becoming less common within those bushland patches than it was. So we've got Econostylus here, the red and green kangaroo paw, and Blancoa canescens. This one's interesting because it's actually at its most southern location in the Perth metropolitan area. It's locally extinct in Serpentine Jarrahdale as far as we know. Now this one I put in particular because it's another herb, it's Phlebicaria ciliata, which is very common in Banksia woodland. It's the habitat for one of the butterflies. Patersonia occidentalis, this has white flowers sometimes, as does the Hovia we saw earlier, Hovia trisperma. They're just a few genes difference, or maybe even one. The Patersonia is one of the most common plants in Banksia woodland as well. And we have many native annuals. These ones are renewed from seed. I'm going to look at two annular renewed groups. Trachymene pilosa, this little one here is the seedling stage, is one of those that's in most patches of Banksia woodland. This is Hyalospermum cotula, and you can see the sort of patch of seedlings you get in the Spearwood dune Banksia woodlands. Annually renewed plants from storage organs. Aboriginal usage of plants. The common milkmaid, Burkhardia congesta, has a lovely tuber system which was used, and also the Hemidorums has some flowers and a plant, and it was called matcha, and this one was called Kara. Has a bulb and was a very important food source once treated. The other group of annually renewed plants are the Drosseras, another big group in Banksia woodlands, and you can see its storage organ here. This is an interesting one. This is the native oxalis. Most of the oxalis you see in bushland, except in the sort of very disturbed patches, are natives, and these natives have tubers as well. Now they do persist a bit, but they can be annually renewed as well. Now one of the interesting things about this is tracking down what's a native and what is a weed. You often have to go and look at old herbarium specimens to see how long they've been collected for. Grasses. Now grasses are quite a small group, 4% of the flora. Grasses are uncommon in Banksia woodland. There's 22. This one can be dominant but not in Banksia woodland. It's scattered in Banksia woodland it occurs. It's a coastal grass that can be on the dunes. When Banksia woodland has been burnt, the first year after the fire, you get a layer of Osteostypa compressor, which is an annual spear grass. Now it's in just about every quadrat we've ever sampled, but in very, very low numbers. But after a fire, it is absolutely a mass of it if the bushland is in good condition. Parts of Kings Park after the last fire looked like this. Not all of it, unfortunately. This bit here, which is underlain by perennial veldtgrass and wild oats, shows you what happens after a fire when it's actually been heavily invaded by weeds. It would be interesting to see what the mechanism was for this dense seed layer that might be a species to use when there'd been a fire and actually sow it into the area. The group that is probably most unseen by people, this is Mesomelina pseudostygia, one of the sedges. So we've got 69 taxa, 11% of the flora of Banksia Woodlands, but they're very common, and that's one of the things that you need to remember about these. Much Banksia woodland, Kings Park for example, has this as the dominant understory species. If it's lost, the vegetation loses its condition. All of this group are very hard to grow. They're the group they call recalcitrant species that they do by transplanting little bits. I've yet to see a Banksia woodland that, maybe it will happen, but I'm yet to see one with all these hundreds of plants in it that occur in the various Banksia woodlands. It has male and female flowers, male first, followed by female. Tetraria australiensis, now this is actually rare flora, it's declared rare flora. This is one of those strange plants that flowers a tiny amount if there's no fires, but after fire, look at that. It looks like wheat. And it was unknown, it was found after a fire at one of the Bush Forever sites. It's very similar to Tetraria octandra, which is very common. Just about any Bassendean or foothills Banksia woodland, you'll get that. But it has a fat base, you're allowed to pull that one up if you've got a collecting permit. This one doesn't. It also, this is the rare one, the leaves have a fine margin of hairs. Another one, Costus dioica, again it has females and males at different stages. And this is another dominant with a really interesting distribution. In fact, all of these sedges I've shown you have really interesting distributions and grow in quite different Banksia woodlands and can be used to actually map the different Banksia woodlands. And lastly, I put in a trigger plant, and Stylidium's a common diverse group in Banksia woodlands, as are the Conostyluses. They provide habitat for fauna, as well as providing food for fauna. And these plants below the knees are some of the most important plants for those invertebrates that live in our bushland. If you want to find any of this information, the Bush Forever site descriptions, this is for Perth. It's a summary from all of the publications we looked at, and they're all quoted. There's also a project called the Perth Region Plant Biodiversity Project, which WALGA has a website for and has detail of a whole series of these areas. Thank you.